Today's Neville Goddard conversation is related to last Sunday's conversation where we discussed ideal relationships, whatever you consider as ideal relationships. The key here when it comes to applying Neville's information is the understanding that we were always applying Neville's information, even before we became aware of Neville's information. For example, when it comes to relationships, we are actually imagining how they are. Notice this. Each time a person is within your physical presence or outside of your physical presence, you imagine how you relate to them, even to a subtle degree at a subconscious level, revealed by how you feel. And from this observation point, you can see clearly what you are imagining about the relationship. The question is really then, is it from the premise of fulfilled desire? If not, you can in that moment reimagine it from the premise of fulfilled desire. What we consciously imagine as true about the relationship becomes how we subconsciously relate to them and how they relate to us, and thus we have the appearance of relationships. So what I share with everyone when asked about relationships is exactly what I do myself. It is the simple act of imagining others lovingly, and they show up that way. This is because there's no one to change but self, as consciousness is one, and also the cause and substance of the phenomena of relationships. I also like to revisit telepathy and thought transmission a bit more, which we touched upon in Thursday's video. I'll link in the description to it. Also, we'll take this simple truth of how you imagine others is how they show up and apply it in 3 effective ways that Neville shares, which are also complementary to each other. By that I mean you could do one or a few or a combination, whatever you'd like, as they all work perfectly, or you can also modify them if you'd like in a way that works best for you, like I do. The 3 are imagining what implies, revision, and mental diet. Now, we've been discussing revision a lot lately, actually in the last 2 Neville conversations. So I'll link in the description to them, and I trust you'll find those to be helpful. So let's start with why all this stuff works so well when it comes to relationships. Ephesians 5:13 states, "All things, when they are admitted, are made manifest by the light. For everything that is made manifest is light." And Neville says in relation to this, the light is consciousness. Consciousness is one, manifesting in legions or forms or levels of consciousness. There is no one that is not all that is, for consciousness, though experienced in an infinite series of levels, is not divisional. There is no real separation or gap in consciousness. I am cannot be divided. So a question worth asking thus far is, are we imagining division in our relationships or oneness? Because the truth is we are all one, as in consciousness is one. And although we may appear in physical form differently, like for example here, I made this video and you are watching it, we're still automatically brought together in mutual harmony. And I know what I imagined, which is my intention to share what I learned from applying this information to bring forth my ideal business and personal relationships, and for you to do the same as well. So here we're sharing in mutual harmony and benefit. The student and teacher are one. We are both the student and teacher to each other, because consciousness is one and our imaginal act brought us here. So now, in his book, Prayer, The Art of Believing, he has a chapter titled Law of Thought Transmission. Let's look at a few of his quotes and connect them to ideal relationships. He says, "Your consciousness is the light reflected on the mirror of your mind and projected in space to the one whom you think. by mentally speaking to the subjective image in your mind, you cause the mirror of your mind to vibrate. Your vibrating mind modifies the light of consciousness reflected on it. The modified light of consciousness reaches the one toward whom it is directed and imprints on the mirror of their mind. It causes their mind to vibrate according to the modification it undergoes. Thus, it reproduces in them what was mentally affirmed by you. For example, if you started a business by choosing a product or service to offer that you know people would desire, the mutual desire exists. They at times may show up via thought transmission, and I know because they mentioned to me how all of a sudden they got an idea or thought of me or something like that. See, I don't believe a desire exists unless there is a reciprocation for it. I see the desirer and the desired are one, vice versa. The client and service provider are one, or as I say sometimes, giving and receiving are one. So I believe that there's always a match for a desire. So in this instance, I simply imagined others would benefit from the products or services I created over the years, and then they showed up via thought transmission. And also what was interesting was when I did not imagine they would desire it, they would not show up. So thus it's very important to consciously imagine ideally how others imagine us. The same is to be said about my personal relationships. When I didn't imagine them showing up reciprocating the desire, that's how they showed up. When I imagined them reciprocating the desire, that's how they showed up. And so if you have a desire, you fulfill it by accepting it. What I do nowadays is whenever I have a desire, I accept it as fulfilled because desire to me means fulfilled. To desire a state is to have it. As in, you are complete inside, already have everything inside. The kingdom of heaven is within you. You don't need to earn the kingdom, you already have it. And this outer world is the world of appearances of what has been accepted as true inside. One of the things I did for a while, which was very helpful, was if I ever felt neediness in a relationship, in whatever shape or form, for whatever the reason may be, where I would look for something in the world of appearances, I would say to myself, I actually have everything inside now. The kingdom of heaven is within now. I found the kingdom. It's inside. And that was instant relief right there because it's true. He says, your beliefs, your fixed attitudes of mind, constantly modify your consciousness as it is reflected on the mirror of your mind. Your consciousness, modified by your beliefs, objectifies itself in the conditions of your world. This reminds me of one of my friends who asked me, why do you initiate conversation with people wherever you are? Isn't it easier to just allow them to come to you? And I said, well, that's a subjective opinion on the matter. Why would one be harder than another? That isn't a belief I'm identified with. For me, it's fine either way or both. I like both now. They actually did not both happen easily before. And because I love connecting with people, I imagine both ways and it happened. This was also my automatic response after reimagining him as embracing both. So his response then was, I knew you were going to say that, even before I said it. Again, because of thought transmission, by reimagining our interaction differently. And I didn't actually have to say that to him. We just talk about this stuff often. Most of the time, I don't say anything. If I see something that I would not consider ideal, I simply reimagine it as ideal because the imaginal act is the cause of what appears, and actually, the unseen within is the cause that animates the imaginal act into physical appearance. So subconscious belief change, or as he said, fixed attitudes of mind, which does not mean permanently fixed, are initiated in imagination, similar to our conversation on Tuesday where we discussed how I apply a variation of Carl Jung's active imagination, which I'll link to the video in the description. Now, I suggest never imagining people as not being loving with you. It's a simple act. If you see someone, imagine them lovingly. When you think of a person in mind, imagine them lovingly. Because I also believe that when I think of them, they're thinking of me. So I imagine whoever pops up in my mind lovingly. Then what happens is you'll notice you automatically imagine people lovingly, and this also brings forth wonderful experiences in life wherever you are. Neville states, referring to Philippians 4:8, "Whatsoever things are lovely, whatsoever things are of good report, if there be any virtue and if there be any praise, think on these things." He says, never accept as true of others what you would not want to be true for you. To awaken a state within another, it must first be awake within you. The state you would transmit to another can only be transmitted if it is believed by you. Therefore, to give is to receive. So as mentioned earlier, giving and receiving are one. What you consciously think feelingly to is done for you by the unseen power within the subconscious aspect of mind, where conscious impressions are stored for expression. Now let's talk about 3 ways of applying all this, which include imagining what implies, mental diet, and revision. And they are complementary to each other, where you could do one or a few or whatever combination, whatever you'd like, or even modify them however you'd like in a way that works best for you. First, we have imagining what implies. This is personal to you. You imagine what implies living the kind of relationships you desire. An easy way to practice this, as mentioned, as a habit in general, is when you are around people, be aware of what you are imagining in relation to them, how you relate with them. Is it ideally, lovingly, from the premise of fulfilled desire? If not, you can imagine whatever implies. For me, I may say something like ideal now, ideal, or flow. So this not only changes the appearance in the moment, it also causes subconscious mind belief change. And what you'll notice, like I do, is that when you are in the presence of anyone, you'll automatically default to imagining them ideally, and thus they automatically appear accordingly. They may even say things to prove it, like, "I wasn't in a good mood before talking with you, and now I am." Then we have revision. This is powerful for releasing identification to the beliefs not true. And Neville speaks of doing this before going to sleep or prior to a nap, which is a state akin to sleep, theta brainwave state, where we can take the events in question of the day in your experiences with others and reimagine it ideally. For example, if a person felt unaccepted by someone, they could reimagine feeling accepted by them in that experience. An example would be once I was at the gym and I saw someone that I normally talk to, or he says hi to me. But this time it appeared he was looking down at me. And I knew in that moment that's what I was imagining. So I imagined him not doing that. I imagined that he was thinking of me at that time ideally. Then I noticed when I saw him again, that's how he appeared. Why I'm bringing this example up specifically also was I remember I had someone I worked with before. I was imagining that he was totally fine with me, so he appeared that way. And then for whatever the reason, he appeared not so ideal. And then I kept dwelling on it and imagining him that way. And when I kept seeing him, he would appear in a not so ideal way. And this was going on for a long time, I think months. And then I knew what was going on because I saw the movie The Secret for the first time around that time. So then I went back to imagining him ideally, and then he started appearing in the ideal way again. And I continued to experience him that way going forth. And so you have the ability to do this real time or in a state akin to sleep. And if you find this hard or challenging, you can change that as well. You can suggest that it is easier each time and it becomes that way. Because that's a meta-belief, a belief about beliefs. Then we have a mental diet. For more elaboration on the mental diet, I recommend my 7-Day Mental Diet by Emmett Fox video, which I'll link to in the description. So it's not the thoughts that show up that matter, only the ones you choose to dwell in that could create overthinking and emotional turmoil. And I would suggest keeping your mind occupied by what you love and enjoy. That would be a generally ideal way of living. For me, I found ideal thoughts in general, in whatever shape or form, equals ideal relationships. I experience more ideal relationships in whatever shape or form by doing this. For example, in business deals, maybe a person really wants a certain business deal to go through, but they keep worrying about it. What I did earlier on my journey was to have so many deals in the pipeline that my thoughts would gladly be ideal and related to those. Therefore, ideal thoughts all throughout the day, allowing the deal that I wanted to happen. Now, I consider my ideal thoughts as priceless, and I recommend that for you as well. As stated in the Hermetica, 2 gifts were bestowed upon humanity. They were mind and speech, and these 2 gifts are equal to immortality, which means conscious thinking is the way to create the life you want, down to the very last nuanced detail. If the mind is saturated with certain beliefs that cause negative thinking and emotional turmoil towards ideal relationships, keeping the mind occupied with what you love works perfectly to purify the mind, and you have fun and enjoy life in the process, making the mental diet easier. And again, why does this all work so perfectly when relating with others? Because as Neville states in the beginning, the light is consciousness. Consciousness is one, manifesting in legions or forms or levels of consciousness. There is no one that is not all that is. For consciousness, though expressed in an infinite series of levels, is not divisional. There is no real separation or gap in consciousness. I am cannot be divided. So this stuff works because consciousness is truly one. Even if the appearances don't seem that way, we look beyond the evidence of the senses in this regard and acknowledge that everything is interconnected and thoughts transmit behind the appearances to call upon those in mutual harmony with those thoughts. The desirer and the desired are one, as Neville stated. It is a fundamental law of consciousness that by telepathy we can have immediate communion with another. So use this talent wisely and use it lovingly to call upon ideal relationships as far as your senses perceive. So I trust you found this video to be helpful. Let's go ahead and conclude this with an auto-suggestion to further encourage. You can say, what I love loves me. This is law. The desirer and the desired are one. All in harmony with this truth show up automatically as consciousness is one, and the cause and substance of the phenomena of relationships. Everything happens automatically and ideally by the power of my awareness, and thus I am aware of being in my ideal relationships now, as far as my senses perceive. If you would like a copy of this mind map, the link is in the description. Thank you very much for watching. I'll talk with you soon. Take care.